Okay, so we just had an investigator on the stand talking much about the keys that were used in the car and the settings in that car for a taller and a shorter person, right, Linda Fairstein? So what exactly do you think that the implication would be there?
Looks like we're being set up for more information, that this is the intermediate witness, that perhaps, I think when the babysitter friend, Ms. Kennedy, said that she left the house, Nicole's car was not in the garage, and apparently it came home. And if the setup is that a taller person...
That was the setting then, the automatic setting, because this is what this witness testified, is there was an automatic setting for that
bigger
taller
person, longer legs.
legs.
Yeah. And that if perhaps Dietrich, the boyfriend, retrieved the car from somewhere. It's suggesting he knew where to find it, he knew where it was.
It would be in that automatic. It would be in that automatic. But then the redirect was all about, well, there could be a chip, to start the car. It could be a different key. It could be, and who knows that, somebody else could be driving it. The defendant could have driven it even in that remote setting.
Correct.
The remote setting, of the car.
Sure, and nobody established his height in this regard.
Exactly.
So it seems open that perhaps the defense is looking to connect.
Right. This is definitely not a key witness in the defense case. Key witness. Pardon the pun. Now we'll go back to the live trial.
With their next witness, I've been told 10 minutes, so 10-minute break at this time.
Okay, so we're back for a 10-minute break. We'll come back when the trial comes back. But I want to go back to the babysitter, because that was really key testimony there. She says that the boyfriend, and this is critical testimony, of course, because we've got the defendant, Burch, saying that the boyfriend really did it. And so all along in this case, as you know, you've been following it, that the prosecution really has been trying to prove not only did their guy do it, but that the boyfriend didn't do it. They've got to be proving both cases all along. In fact, really this case has come down to the boyfriend didn't do it. And by the way, they had arrested the boyfriend from the beginning, because as you know, as prosecuting as many cases as you did, especially when women are found dead, and especially intimate partners, sexual partners are found dead, it's usually the boyfriend that's arrested and did it. So it's critical testimony here that the babysitter took the stand for the defense and said that the victim was hit in the head and wanted to walk home. This is testimony now coming from the mouth of the boyfriend on the night of the crime to the babysitter, and this testimony came out. What do you think, Linda?
So it's very important, obviously. The Dietrich, the boyfriend, came home, says this to the babysitter in the house. I'm not clear, I don't think it was made clear where he heard this.
No.
And if it was still at the bar, that gives him more room, because something could have happened to her and she asked somebody else to drive her home, or she started to walk and someone like the defendant followed her out, picked her up. But it really seemed to me that the babysitter doesn't like Dietrich, the boyfriend husband.
No.
She kind of talked about she wanted to get out of the house. She
wanted to get away from him.
Wanted to get away. Wanted to lock the door of the court, not because it was night and it was dangerous and who knows.
But she felt something. She wanted to get away from the boyfriend.
Yes. So I don't know what her relationship is with the defendant, but this certainly sets up as her kind of turning the screw again against the boyfriend, first arrested.
Right.
So keeping alive by the defense team the idea that he is more culpable than Burch.
Interesting. Okay, I think we should go, because you just brought up something here about where there were so many openings here with her testimony. So let's replay what she said and see if some of the questions that you raised may be answered when we listen again to that testimony that we just heard. Here's the babysitter on the stand.
And he basically had stated that that was her body that they had found and that she had passed. And basically in conversation, I just asked, what happened? What happened? And he just replied, I don't know. She hit her head and then she just wanted to walk home. Just in a conversation. It was just conversation between two people of just in shock. I asked if he was with family and that he should just be with his family right now, and if he needed anything, reach out later, but kind of grieve with your family.
So specifically, when you had asked him what happened, he said, "I don't know, she hit her head," correct?
It came out of his mouth, that comment. I don't know what that meant, but it came out of his mouth.
And then what did you do?
It was just kind of silent, just taking everything all in. The conversation was short. It was pretty much ended after that. I think he just wanted to let me know that they found out the news that she's no longer with them. So.
Thank you.
I'm going to sustain that last objection, so.
And Dallas, why did you decide to leave?
Because Nicole didn't come home, I didn't feel comfortable being there with her not being there, and I just wanted to get back, just wanted to get out of there.
And when you left, did you drive there?
Yes.
So what did you do then?
I got into my car, locked the doors, just kind of looked around the cul-de-sac a little bit.
Why did you lock your doors?
I was just scared, I didn't think he would do anything, I was just scared. I don't know. Everything just seemed so odd in the evening.
Just a strange feeling?
Yeah, just wanted to go home.
You had been out on Friday, May 20th of 2016 in the morning. You came over to the house, is that correct?
Correct.
And is it correct you had breakfast with Nikki?
Yes.
And that breakfast took place at her home, is that right?
Yes.
So you were at Berkeley. Did you drive over on that occasion?
Yes.
And when you drove over, you observed her car was parked in the garage, is that correct?
Yes.
And am I correct that the two of you then did some rummage sale shopping?
Yes.
Did you drive to that or did you walk around?
It was just in her neighborhood in the cul-de-sac area, so we just stayed there.
Okay. Was your vehicle in the driveway at that point in time?
Yes, on the left side of the driveway.
And how long would you say that you went rummage sale shopping?
I think we were together for maybe about 2.5 hours.
And is it correct at about 11 a.m. you were done and you returned to your vehicle?
Roughly, yes.
And did you leave at that point in time?
Shortly after, yes.
And Nikki went in to take a shower, is that right?
Yes.
Were you driving a silver Chevrolet Equinox at that point in time?
Yes.
But this was on Friday, May 20th at roughly 11 a.m. that you left, is that right?
Yes.
And that would be the morning when you finished the rummage sale shopping?
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
That was Miss Kennedy on the stand. Now, she was the babysitter on the night of the murder. And she was uncomfortable, Linda, there. She said she wanted to get away. You brought that point up. She really said that. She's just very uncomfortable. But she also said, the boyfriend said to her that the victim got hit in the head and wanted to walk home.
Yes.
Interesting.
Very interesting. The dynamic was interesting. She, of course, we first saw her last week called by the prosecution.
Right.
Because they had to establish when Nicole left the house and that the baby was there.
Right.
And I'm thinking prosecution witness. Now I hear her today and see her demeanor, and my thought is friend of the defense. Simply,
And we don't know what the backstory
and we don't
is
know,
there, right.
and we don't know what was it. She looked very comfortable answering the defense questions. She almost had a smile on her face. I mean, she broke down when she got to the being told that Nicole was no longer with us. But she smiled about smoking marijuana, not her, Detroit smoking marijuana and leaving the house, and she felt very uncomfortable. And then she tenses up again when the prosecution cross-examines her because, of course, she doesn't know what the cross-examination is going to be. She knows from prep what the defense was asking her. So I was fooled myself because having seen her last week, my immediate thought was prosecution witness, but now she looks much more like she's trying to reinsert Detroit, the boyfriend, back into the consideration of guilt for the jury. That's what it looks like.
Right. Interesting. Now, before Ms. Kennedy, we had Jason Lemon, who took the stand, and he had some interesting testimony. He said that Nikki said that she might get in trouble that night, and I want to hear that testimony again and hear how he said that, because I think that's fascinating. And listen to the way he said that, and let's try to analyze what he might have meant by that, and what she was saying to him about she might get in trouble that night. What did that mean? Let's hear that. That was just happened right before the babysitter testified. Let's hear that again.
You said you had 5 drinks when you got to the sardine can. Did you continue to drink when you got to the sardine can then?
Yeah, I had a shot with her, and then I had probably 1, maybe 2 drinks there.
Okay, so total of maybe 6 or 7 throughout that night?
Throughout the night, yeah.
Okay. And with respect to the statement that Nikki told you, what was her demeanor like when she told you that statement about she might get in trouble?
It didn't seem like she was panicked or anything like that. It was, like I said, I kind of just shrugged it off as a typical, like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm talking with another guy or something like that. She didn't seem like she was distressed or trying to portray anything.
She didn't seem very concerned at that point?
Not terribly, no. I mean, like I said, maybe it was a nervous laughter or something that she did. I don't know. I didn't pick up on it. But she kind of said that and then just had laughed it off.
Okay. And you stated that, for the most part, Nikki seemed happy during your interaction with her at the sardine can?
Yeah. I mean, usually when we would see each other out, we'd kind of talk for a little while and hang out and just have a good time. And so it was kind of the same thing that I'm used to whenever I run into her.
And you were with Nikki for about 20 or 30 minutes on that night?
Yeah, just we were talking at the bar.
And that was the sum total of your interaction with her on that night?
Yes.
And do you know who her boyfriend was at that point?
I didn't, no. I've become aware since then, but I had never met him.
So when you talked about Nikki's demeanor when she mentioned getting in trouble for talking with you, she wasn't panicked, but it also didn't fit the conversation either, correct?
It stuck out, so, I mean, I guess maybe it was a little off kilter. But like I said, at the time, I didn't really think much of it, but it definitely did stick out in my mind.
And that's why you made sure you told police about it when they came and talked to you?
Yeah.
And you obviously didn't provide every single thing you talked to Nikki about in your statement?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, at this point, I don't remember almost anything specific of what we talked about besides the typical, like, hey, how you doing, how's it been, that type of stuff, but that did stick out.
Nothing further, Judge.
Any recross at all?
No, Your Honor.
Hearing that out for the second time, something just really stuck in my mind in the last couple of seconds, Linda. He said, nothing really stuck out in my mind in our conversation, just little tidbits. So if something really dramatic she had said, if she had said it like, the phrase, she might get into trouble that night, if it had been so dramatic the way she had said it, it really would have stuck out. And he just said, nothing really stuck out in my mind about that night. I mean,
well, I agree with you.
What she said.
It's hearing things a second or third time. I wrote down what got me this time is it was what we usually talked and hung out.
There you go.
It's what
you and I are thinking of the same
thing.
Exactly.
And so I'm thinking, well, he knows her and he's been with her before and now he's spending 20 to 30 minutes and she's laughing about this. So is it, see me talking to a cute guy like you and he might be
into trouble, a little banter back and forth. It's almost a compliment to the guy, exactly.
But she doesn't turn and walk away and say, don't let him see us.
Right.
And he's had 5, 6, 7 drinks a shot with her.
Made clear in the cross, right.
So what's he remembering, or has he been asked to remember this? Has Burch said, is he Burch's friend? Has Burch said, be sure you tell him
she said
was a jealous guy.
Right.
But the hearing it again, as we do in the business, you go back and you parse every line.
Exactly.
And I hope your viewers are doing the same thing.
Exactly. Well, they are, because they're
good.
on top of this and they're listening to this as we are.
Yeah.
And you do get something more from the second time you hear it. And it's just think, wait a second, what really sticks out in my mind is that it doesn't stick out. That there's something not there. That it wasn't, it didn't just like hit him like a ton of bricks. That it wasn't that dramatic.
Right.
And that really that's really an important point to make. So much of this trial has been about the Fitbit and the Fitbit evidence and whether or not it was coming in. And parts of the Fitbit evidence did come in. This judge did allow Fitbit evidence, and some of it did not come in. The sleep evidence, the sleep evidence of the Fitbit did not come in. The awake evidence did come in. To put it bluntly, I'm no scientific expert. And that's it right there. No, they didn't need scientific experts. This judge decided they can have people, law enforcement, to come on in and introduce this Fitbit evidence, which I found fascinating. We're going to play a clip of it in just a second, but before we do, wasn't that interesting to you that here we have brand new evidence, Fitbit evidence, that we're also interested in, because not many trials, there have been a few, but not many, have used this kind of evidence to show where somebody was or was not, or could not have been, to strike an alibi or not strike an alibi. And yet they didn't have an expert from Fitbit or the company or a store or anything. They had law enforcement there. What did you think of that?
I was waiting for this moment in the anticipation of the trial. I'm watching you and your colleagues do the case.
Right.
Very much surprised me. We're both prosecutors. I'm older, so we've seen the introduction of a lot of scientific evidence, social media evolution. The first time a cell phone record was introduced into evidence, I remember well in my cases. And then, Instagram and texts and things.
Right.
And I'm thinking, why wouldn't you want the people who
Cutting-edge
created
people,
this,
right,
who can explain, and maybe you would have gotten more in sleeping versus waking.
Right.
How do you know movement versus tossing in bed?
And showing the graphs and all of this kind of stuff, how it works, and
and I'm sure a talented bright law enforcement person could. I'm assuming on that jury, as in almost any jury today, not everybody has a Fitbit. And so I would want, in my courtroom as a prosecutor, I would want the most exacting expert who could leave no doubt about why these people can rely on that piece of new technology.
Well, you said the magic word, doubt, because in the cross-examination on these non-experts on the Fitbit evidence, that's exactly what the defense was doing. They were going tick by tick by tick by tick, saying, well, you don't do it, you don't test for this, or you don't know for that, or you're not an expert in this. And these law enforcement folks who are not experts had to answer in the affirmative, yes, 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 no, 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 and really down the line in cross-examination agree with the defense. And you and I well know that's not a good position if you're the prosecutor to be in. Let's play just a little bit of this and see it again, and you'll see what I mean. Let's go back to that happened just earlier today in the Fitbit evidence in the Burch trial.
Sergeant Lopnow, with respect to the Fitbit data, were you asked to do any further analysis on that data yourself and comparing it to known samples of Mr. Dietrich's activity?
Yes, I was. We had the...
We're going to have to come back to that Fitbit evidence because now we're back live in the courtroom. So here we go. We're going to transport you right now all the way to Wisconsin and back to the Burch case. We're live back in the trial.
Fairstein, to the witness stand, and Jody will swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Sergeant Roman Ernstein. A-R-O-N-S-T-E-I-N.
Whenever you're ready, counsel.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Ernstein, how are you employed?
I'm employed as a deputy sheriff for the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been in that role?
I've been a deputy sheriff for the Sheriff's Office since 2001.
And did you work in law enforcement before then?
I did.
And who was that with?
I was a military police officer with the United States Army. and I also worked for 2 smaller municipal agencies in the state of Wisconsin briefly prior to coming to Brown County.
Can you briefly describe any training that you've received in law enforcement?
I can. So I've received from 2008 to 2013. I was a narcotics investigator for the Brown County Drug Task Force. So I received a number of training involved in drug trafficking and investigations involving death, involving drugs. Since 2008 until from 2013 until the present, I've been a detective with the Brown County Sheriff's Office, so I've received a number of trainings involving financial crimes as well as crimes against persons, sexual assaults, death investigations, those kind of things.
And how many homicide investigations have you taken part in?
Probably a handful.
And then did you specifically, were you part of the investigation into the death of Nicole Vanderheiden?
I had a peripheral role, that is correct.
Can you describe what your role was?
Sure. I was one of a number of detectives that was tasked to conduct canvasses for surveillance cameras, conduct interviews of different individuals that were identified in the investigation, as well as assist with searches.
And were any of those specific searches at a residence on Berkeley Road?
At least one was, that's correct.
And who owned that house?
I don't have any personal information on that. I believe through the investigation I learned that the residence was associated with the victim, in this case the decedent, and her live-in boyfriend.
And who was that boyfriend?
It's Douglas Dietrich, I believe.
And do you remember what time you conducted this search?
I believe the search was on May 24, 2016. I think the search had already initiated prior to my arrival. I arrived a short time after that. In preparation for trial today, I reviewed the log that was kept that day documenting folks that were present at the search warrant, and I believe I was there roughly from 12:30 to 8:30 p.m.
What were officers specifically looking for?
It was a search warrant that was in furtherance of this homicide investigation, and we were looking for any evidence that would assist in either including or exclude any individuals or items that may be related to this investigation.
And then which rooms in this house did you specifically search or help search?
I believe I was present throughout the house.
And did that include the garage?
It did.
Do you remember searching the garage?
I remember being present and searching the garage, that's correct.
Did you find anything of evidentiary value that you noticed?
I do recall that I had identified some wires that were located on top of a refrigerator in the northeast portion of the garage.
If we show you a photo, would you be able to show us where roughly you found those wires?
I can, yes.
Judge, we would ask to republish an older exhibit. It's 136.
136 has already been received. Let's republish it at this time.
So you can see on the projector, that's the garage from what you remember it?
It appears to be accurate. I believe there was a vehicle in the garage at one point in time, and then it was removed.
And there's multiple refrigerators, or maybe one refrigerator and one chest freezer?
I do see that, and I do recall looking in those areas.
And do you remember where specifically, or more specifically, you found the wires?
To the best of my recollection, I believe there was a box on top of the standing refrigerator, and I believe they were in that box. But that's to the best of my recollection.
Were there a lot of wires throughout the house?
I don't recall seeing a lot of wires throughout the house, no.
Why did wires stand out to you as being of evidentiary value?
I believe at this point in time it was made known to investigators that were assisting in the investigation that part of the cause of death involves strangulation, and that there may have been some wires that were located that were believed to be involved in the offense.
The judge is taking a sidebar right now here with the attorneys. On the stand, they have a deputy sheriff. He was the one that searched the garage there. And Linda, he found on the garage wire on top of the refrigerator. What do you think that they're trying to go? Well, it looks like now they're done with the sidebar, so we'll go back to the trial live.
That there was a substantial amount of staff that were on scene. There were crime response people that were there from the Wisconsin Crime Lab. There were also individuals assigned to documenting things through photographs, such as the one that we saw. And then we also had an evidence custodian that was assigned to specifically collect items of what was believed to be evidentiary value.
And then specifically with these wires, can you just tell us what color are they?
They appear to be blue, white, and black in color.
And then is it fair to say, do you remember that the first set of 3 was in a bundle and the second set of 3 was in a bundle?
To be fair, like I indicated earlier, I would have had a very brief interaction with these items, and then I would have pointed them out to others, and then I would have moved on, continuing with the search. I recall having examined those earlier with the defense counsel, and I do recall them to be in bundles. I have no reason to believe that they were in any other state at the time that they were located.
And with the first set of wires, did you measure them? Or did you observe a tape measure?
I observed the measurements conducted earlier today.
And roughly with that first set, do you remember how long they were?
All 3 of them were roughly between 36 to 37 inches.
And then do you remember, are they coated with something on the outside, those colors? Is that a rubber or latex coating?
I don't know what kind of material it is, but they do appear to be coated with a material that exhibits the colors that I earlier described.
And then is there an internal wire that you can see at the ends of those wires?
There appears to be, yes.
And what color are those for the first bundle?
They appear to be silver in color. And that would be the bundle that's currently wrapped in a rubber band type of a material or a string.
Sure. And then the second bundle, do you remember how long those were?
I believe I observed the measurements earlier today to be all between 40 to 42 inches approximately.
And they have those same outer coatings?
They do have the outer coatings, correct.
And then the ends of those, where you can see the wires sticking out, what color are those?
They appear to be darker color, more goldish in color.
Judge, I would move that these items be moved into evidence.
And that's Exhibit 182? Is that correct? Any objection to 182 subject to cross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, 182 is received.
I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor, I would ask that the wires be published to the jury so they can see them.
Right. Any objection to that, Attorney Sugart?
I think the sheriff's office might.
As long as they stay in the bag. I would just ask that we seal the bag first.
All right, well, why don't we seal the bag, and then along the same lines as a jury was able to have the earlier exhibits containing wire reviewed, that can be published to them at this time.
So we've just had a deputy sheriff on. I noted he's now is the second law enforcement officer that the defense has called, which is unusual. And he's testified about finding different shades and lengths of wire in the defendant's house, in the boyfriend's house, and different shades, 36 to 37 inches, 40 to 42 inches, different shades, silver, different colors, black, red, white, on top of the refrigerator. Now, this could be important depending on how she was strangled for the defense if they want to implicate the boyfriend saying, obviously making the implication that he had access to the wires, right, Linda?
Correct. And so ligature strangulation is when an object is put around the victim's neck, rope, wires.
Right.
At this point, there's probably no autopsy report available to the police. They may not know whether it was, since she was so badly beaten, one assumption is hands, manual strangulation, no wire, no rope could have been used, and in many cases it's a combination of both. So if somebody is suggesting whether it was Burch himself, I've seen these wires in the garage.
I'll take those.
Yes.
Right, just on a
just
last
a house.
minute. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or just the police looking for every possible thing that might fit the murder scenario, then you've got these wires, and I don't mean to smile at something that's serious, but these are being passed among the jurors, so I'm assuming they are not blood covered or were not used, whether anything similar has been used or was introduced, we know from the people's case.
And remember always, folks, that the standard here is reasonable doubt. Are they just trying to build here reasonable doubt with something like the wires, for example, that the boyfriend here had these wires, had access to the wires. Why did he have all these wires of multi-different colors that the jury has now seen? It's been published.
Right.
Published means obviously showing an exhibit to the jury, as we've just seen.
Yes.
Let's go back and see what they're saying here.
We don't have anybody else for today.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that'll conclude testimony for today. There's some other issues we're going to discuss this afternoon. We're on track to get done within the original 2-week calendar. And I just want you to know these are the last couple of days when we're releasing you early and we're discussing some legal issues. That will lessen the amount of time that there is between the conclusion of the evidence and closing argument. I think this is a better practice. So we'll excuse you for the remainder of today. Again, I admonish you not to discuss this case with anyone or to view any television articles, newspaper articles, and then we'll reconvene tomorrow again at 8:30. I appreciate your patience. Have a good evening.
I'm Lise Wheel. I'm here with Linda Fairstein, and we were just talking about Fitbit before we had to be cut off to go back to the live trial. It looks like now that we have finished the live trial for today, we did not get the defendant on the stand or see the defendant on the stand, which I think, let's face it, we here at Law&Crime, and I think everybody else watching Law&Crime, are all anticipating. Now, usually, most times, the defendant does not testify, I would say, in a criminal trial. Is that right, Linda?
That's right.
That's right. The defendant usually doesn't testify. And it's completely their right, and you cannot say anything about it if they don't testify. And in fact, if you do, that's cause for a mistrial, and you absolutely lose that on appeal. In fact, we've seen a mistrial or a retrial going on in Florida right now based on exactly that there was some comment about the defendant not testifying. So that is an absolute no-no. But in this case, I really think that the defendant almost has to take the stand because he's really built this case around, yes, my DNA is there, and yes, I was there for some part of this, and yes, I did help do some of these awful things, but I didn't commit the murder. The boyfriend did.
Absolutely.
And pointing the boyfriend. So doesn't he have to take the stand because he's the only one that could tell the story? The victim obviously can't tell the story.
Right. And I think his lawyers already announced to the jury that he's going to take the stand, which is a terrible mistake if you're not going to, if things rock and roll during the trial. But you're absolutely right. I mean, here you have the case where Dietrich, the boyfriend, father of the baby, is actually arrested and is in jail for a couple of weeks. So that's got to be in every juror's mind. It's part of the story in this case. Why did they think he was guilty enough that he actually was denied his freedom and charged with this? So it seems very likely that Burch will want to tell this story that confuses things enough, or entirely, if he's lucky and he's credible, shifts the blame back to Dietre and has his DNA. They're the reasons he can't excuse, but he can dance around them, perhaps to the belief of the jury, to save his own position in this.
Well, now, wait just a second, because the testimony, and we will go back to the Fitbit because it is critical. But the testimony, the cross-examination on the Fitbit was, in my estimation, actually pretty good. It really was. They kind of came back and said, really, is this Fitbit, is it absolutely accurate? Is it now? I'll just tell you in my own experience, and you guys chime in. I mean, sometimes it tells me I'm walking all of those steps, and I'm like, I don't think I walked all of those steps. And sometimes it's telling me I didn't walk steps, and I'm thinking, I walked a lot of steps, and why is it telling me? Now, I don't know, and I'm not an expert, and nor are you, but they didn't have the experts, and I wonder if that wasn't a big mistake. So they've got that, and we'll go back to Fitbit. But then they have all these witnesses today, and now they have this babysitter who talks about the boyfriend saying, he said that she was hit in the head, which is how she died, hit in the head in strangulation, and she wanted to walk home. We've got the last deputy sheriff. There were 2 law enforcement officers taking the stand for the defense. This is now before the defendant's taking the stand, saying there were bundles of wires on the garage. The boyfriend obviously had access to different colors, different sizes. We're talking about a case of strangulation. Again, I don't know about you, but that garage has a lot of wires going on there, and a lot of access. I mean, again, he had access to it. So you got the other law enforcement officer who talked about the key in the car, and it's set for the right,
bigger guy.
For a bigger guy, and this is the car that could have been used. I mean, I wonder, at this point, they called sort of prematurely an end to the day. Do you think the defense is sort of sitting back going,
It could well be.
Do we need to call him?
This is a messy crime, not that there are terrifically neat ones, but it's not a stranger coming into town whose DNA is found. It's not a straightforward domestic. These are people, defendant on trial, boyfriend arrested, dead woman. These are people who partied together. They were all at a concert together. They were all at a bar together, mutual friends. Everybody had a little too much to drink. So it seems to me, with the inevitability of Burch's DNA, the defendant's DNA, all over the crime scene, he and his team are doing a very good job of setting up all of these detours. And they're not even red herrings. I mean, they're real facts. There is wire. There is a setting on the garage.
Right.
To your point about the Fitbit, now do you think, I do, that the prosecution may have to, on redirect, call a Fitbit expert because so many holes were created?
I don't know if they can, because as you know, redirect is just a smaller part of direct. You could only redirect on the, they may be too limited on their redirect. I got to chime in here for a second. We've got a local news report that's just come in saying the defense says that Burch might testify tomorrow.
Ooh.
That's a change.
Yes.
No decision yet. Now they're talking with the judge, now this is new, about possible issues with a jailhouse snitches testifying.
Whoa.
Whoa. So 2 points there. Might testify tomorrow, which means if he's going to testify, he'll testify tomorrow. I need to just find out who's hosting tomorrow and see if I can get a deal.
Invite yourself in.
Can I invite myself in? Who's ever testified tomorrow? Can I be here? Anyway, that's sort of inside here. And might testify, but no decision yet. So that's sort of like we were just talking about there, a minute ago, that they may think, because we open up doors, obviously, when you put the defendant on the stand, and a lot of stuff can come in that you not necessarily want. It's not like you just walk in, tell your flowery story, and then just sit down and have no cross-examination.
Right.
You open yourself up to cross-examination. And in history, as we know, there's some stuff in his history he may not want out. So that's first part of it. Might now, not necessarily will. And issues of jailhouse snitches testifying.
Boy,
Woo!
that is, that's the stuff of
Lordy,
fiction
lordy.
that doesn't always happen, really.
And we're both
in a
fiction
trial.
writers here. We're both fiction writers
You can
here.
put that in a book,
Let's
but
put that in a book.
You rarely get to that point in a case
Mm-hmm.
where that's going to be a viable thing. It stops everything cold. I
Yes.
mean, who so far has interviewed or knows about this person? If he's in the jail, think about it, folks. Obviously, he's got a criminal history,
Right.
so how credible is he
Right.
going to be? And this is a jury that's been led up and down. I mean, I think the defense team is calling every little hole that they can
Right.
in this case to complicate the relationship between defendant Gregory Burch
Right.
and husband, widower,
Right,
boyfriend
boyfriend.
of the
Yeah, right.
and their complicated relationship.
Now let's play this out. If the jailhouse snitch is a jailhouse snitch of the boyfriend, right? Because remember, he was arrested.
Yes.
So say he spent any time in prison, even in jail, not prison, jail, for a night
Couple
or
weeks
so.
he was there, yeah.
Right, a couple weeks. If they found a jailhouse snitch of the boyfriend, not the defendant, mind you, the boyfriend, and they have somebody that they have, and they can put that person on the stand, even though he's got a criminal history, which of course will be brought out into cross-examination.
Bad. But we also know that Gregory Burch has been in jail.
Right. So
So
that
we
could
don't
be
know
that.
what jail
yeah,
it
we don't know
is.
what jailhouse snitch. We could have. You know how usually, sometimes in cases, especially now with the Fitbit evidence, and we thought this is with the case of this whole case about scientific
Come right
evidence,
down.
and it was going to come down to dueling experts in scientific evidence with the Fitbits. Now we may have dueling snitches.
Right. And
We
people
may
who are
have
in
the-
jail with either or both, and there's such a reliability
Right.
issue with them in general in the world, and so it's going to be interesting. I assume there might have to be a hearing for somebody to prove the bona fides to the judge that this is relevant and material, but it's ratchets up what's going on certainly tonight from one side or the other, whoever snitch this happens to be.
And I just want to give a shout out to the local news reporters that gave that to us. Their Twitter handles are at Ashton and at KitKat2409. Thank you so much at Ashton and at KitKat2409. We really rely on our local news reporters to get us that kind of information right here at
Wow.
Law&Crime, because that's really dynamite information. So thank you so much. That's really, really good stuff to get.
Does
that.
either one of them tell you any more? Are you teasing us?
Oh, this is just. I'm going to be more. Okay, more from local news reports. Here we go. Okay. The defense contends that Burch's scenario of what happened is already out there because of the Denny motions. Defense indicates jailhouse snitches are looking to gain something, well, they always are.
Of course.
From something coming forward and are unreliable. Well, yeah. They expect more to come forward. Okay. Well, that's the problem with jailhouse snitches.
Yes.
I mean, have you ever met a jailhouse snitch that was just doing it because they just really felt like they got up one day and wanted to be nice and just like didn't want
I
anything
haven't
on
met
it?
that one
Right.
yet.
You haven't met that one? I haven't either. I keep waiting in line to meet that jailhouse snitch who didn't want anything. So, of course, what happens in cross-examination is the defense or the prosecution, whoever hasn't put the person on, says, you're in there for what? Murder, and you've got how many life sentences? 3, and because you're going to do this, you're going to how many life sentences off? I'm going to get 1 life sentence off of 3. I mean, something. I'm making this up, of course,
exactly.
but they get some of their sentence.
What promises have been made to
been made,
you?
of course.
Yeah.
They're going to get something. They don't just come forward and say,
Rarely.
I'm just doing this because I'm a nice guy.
Right.
But the question then becomes of entrapment and things like that. But these are big developments. And the jailhouse snitch is a big development, and the fact that Burch may or may not testify.
Yes, yes. Are they getting enough out there?
Right.
You used the expression before for reviewers, reasonable doubt. You know, do the wires create doubt? Does the story of the babysitter who says she was hit in the head and
right.
I didn't want to be with him. I already had bad vibes that night. I
right.
wanted out of the house. I didn't feel safe. I mean, each of these things can appeal just to one juror, and one juror, each one can appeal to a different juror. So it's really why you never know what's going on when those jurors go behind closed doors to do their work.
Well, and that's how we want. This is such great stuff. This came from a reporter from the Fox station. This last great breaking news. Fox reporter at Ben Krumholtz, WLUK. That's Crum with K, RUNHOLZ, WLUK. That's Fox station WLUK. And we really thank Ben for bringing that latest information to us about the jailhouse snitches and gaining something from coming forward and their potentiality of being unreliable. We've never heard of those jailhouse snitches. We just don't know those ones. But it really, the plot thickens here. I tend to think that the defense still is going to, since they made that promise to the jurors, and also they'll still put Burch on the stand. And also, what I'm thinking about is our closing arguments.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Very definitely going to play a huge part in wrapping this all up and giving the jurors a theory of the case from each side that's going to make the most sense. And so you've got physical evidence to work with, a lot of DNA. You have all of the people who were with all these parties before Nicole disappeared, and people taking sides of each, apparently, in this. Actions the day after. A lot of technology involved, not just the Fitbit, but that Detroit didn't have his phone, so was he not looking for her, or was that fascinating testimony that he was actually Facebook messengering people going to help his cause? It's science and here technology plays a huge part in this case.
Right, it really does. I mean, this is, to my mind, the first case that really was so relied on Fitbit, to the point, though, that it's interesting to me that when it really came down to it, that you did not see an expert on the stand qualified as an expert in Fitbit analysis technology as somebody from the academy world, if you will, of Fitbit, but really law enforcement. Let's take a look. We've been doing some replays, and even each time we do that, Linda, I feel like we're getting educated. We can even bring more things, and we catch more. So let's take a look at a clip of the Fitbit analysis, the non-sort of expert analysis of that, and we'll come back to you after replaying a little bit more of the Fitbit testimony.
Sergeant Lopnow, with respect to the Fitbit data, were you asked to do any further analysis on that data yourself and comparing it to known samples of Mr. Dietrich's activity?
Yes, I was. We had the videotape interviews of Mr. Dietrich in which he is on video with his Fitbit on his wrist. So I was asked to compare the data that we received from Fitbit to what was viewed in those videos.
Can you describe for the jury how you went about doing that?
I had the copy of the video. I guess to give you an example, I have two screens on my computer, so I had the video on one screen and I had the Excel spreadsheet of the Fitbit data on the other screen, so I was comparing them side by side.
The Excel spreadsheet of the Fitbit data, how is that organized?
There's several spreadsheets within that document. The one I used to compare was labeled steps by minute. So for example, there's also a spreadsheet in that document labeled distance by minute, I believe, and a couple other ones, but I used the one detailing the steps recorded per minute.
So really what you were interested in is comparing the number of steps on the Fitbit report to the number of steps that you were able to potentially observe Mr. Dietrich taking on the videos that you were watching.
Yes, that's correct.
When you received the information from Fitbit, was that initially in UTC or was that in Central Standard Time?
I believe it was Central Standard Time.
And were you able to adequately come to a conclusion about the accuracy of that data based on looking at it and comparing it to the known data on the video?
Yes, I was.
Did you watch the entirety of Mr. Dietrich's recorded interviews?
I did.
And those were two separate recorded interviews, is that correct?
Yes, the first interview by Sergeant Holschbach with her initial interview of Doug at his residence, as well as a follow-up interview at the Sheriff's Office by Detective Kingston and Deputy Caters.
And the first interview at Mr. Dietrich's house, how long was that interview?
I believe it was about 2 hours.
So you were able to view minute by minute Mr. Dietrich's activities and compare them to each minute of the recorded activities from Fitbit?
Yes, I was.
And the interview again at the Sheriff's Office, how long was that?
About 3 hours.
And were you able to do the same thing with respect to that data, compare the information minute by minute from Fitbit to your minute by minute observations of Mr. Dietrich's activities?
Yes, I did.
Is it fair to say that during large portions of each of those videos, there is no activity by Mr. Dietrich, either that he's seated or not moving?
Yes.
And when Mr. Dietrich is seated or not moving, what is the Fitbit registering?
It's registering that there are no steps being taken.
And that is reported in minute by minute data?
Yes.
0 steps per minute?
Yes.
Did you note any instances where Mr. Dietrich was not moving, but the Fitbit was registering activity?
There was a couple instances. One I recall during the initial interview by Sergeant Steffens at his residence, he pulls his phone out of his pocket. You can see his hands moving. He's not necessarily taking steps, but he's showing Sergeant Holschbach the phone. At that point, there are several steps recorded. Also, I remember in the interview at the Sheriff's Office, there are times when he begins talking with his hands. So he's still seated, but he's moving his hands quite a bit. And at that point, there are some steps registered.
Out of the 300 individual minutes that you noted, how many times did you observe a discrepancy between Mr. Dietrich not actually taking steps where you observed the Fitbit registering steps?
I believe there was about 3 times I observed that. And in those cases, he was moving his hands, but not necessarily moving his feet or taking steps.
Where's the Fitbit device affixed to his body, if you could observe it?
It was on his left wrist.
So it actually registers wrist movement, correct?
Correct.
In addition, were there instances where you could observe Mr. Dietrich taking steps where the device was not registering any activity?
There was a couple instances of that. I believe in the initial interview by Sergeant Holschbach, there was times when he was seated in close proximity to where she was sitting when they were completing a written statement. He does lean forward and get up to show her a phone. I believe that happened once or twice where no steps were registered. In reviewing the video, he's leaning forward from, I believe it was a bar stool in the kitchen and leaning and taking, stepping towards her to show her the phone, but not taking steps, so to speak, or making any jerky movements.
And that's a situation where Mr. Dietrich may have taken 1 or 2 steps forward, but the device did not register any activity.
Yes.
And you said that happened on 2 or 3 occasions in that video?
I believe it was once or twice in that video, and then in the video from the Sheriff's Office in his follow-up interview, there was a couple of occasions where he actually stood up, took a drink of his beverage, I believe, stretched, and then sat down. So at that point, no steps were recorded. I believe there was also another instance where he got up to stretch and slowly paced a little bit in the interview room, and that also did not record any steps.
Sergeant Lopnow, I just want to focus on this Fitbit data a little bit. So you said that you were able to watch the videos that were available to the Brown County Sheriff's Office of Doug Dietrich, correct?
Yes.
And you said it was about 2 hours on May 21st and 3 hours on May 22nd?
If I remember correctly, yes.
So I know lawyers are pretty bad at math, but I'm going to try to do this. So as the state was saying, the minutes you were able to watch, that also means that, so there was 22 hours that you weren't able to identify any sort of Fitbit data and compare it to what Doug Dietrich was actually doing on video, correct?
Can you clarify what you're asking?
So you watched 2 hours on May 21st. 2 hours
Yes.
of video.
Correct.
And there's 22 hours of time that you didn't watch.
That's correct. For this report, I was specifically comparing the data to the times that were on record that we had recorded.
So then just to put it in terms of minutes, that's 1,320 minutes of time that you yourself did not watch.
That's possible. I would need a calculator to confirm that.
Me too. And then same thing on May 22nd, so there's 3 hours you watched, but that also means that there's 21 hours that you don't have accounted for, correct?
Correct.
So then that's 1,260 minutes.
Again,
or around there.
Yes, very possible, yes.
So in total, that's 2,580 or right around there minutes that you didn't watch yourself.
Again, I can't give you exact numbers, but approximately, yes.
And you said that there was some errors in the Fitbit data, but they were minor in your opinion?
There were those small inconsistencies, as we discussed in watching the video compared to those times when it did record a couple steps. Mr. Dietrich is seen moving his hands at that time with the Fitbit on his wrist. A couple instances also, as we discussed, when he was taking steps, a couple steps, there wasn't a lot of motion. There were very slow movements, and at that time it did not record.
So those were errors in the data, albeit minor?
Yes.
And then I know you're trying to explain why those errors didn't happen. Do you have the technological background to be able to diagnose those errors? Or is that just your lay opinion on it?
I'm describing what I viewed in the video compared to the records, just that.
Okay. Do you have a background in technology where you can tell us how a Fitbit operates?
No, I don't.
Can you tell us how the Fitbit app operates?
No, I can't.
Okay.
We've been rewatching the sergeant in the prosecution case, although the cross-examination looks more like the defense in the Burch case. In the Fitbit analysis, prosecution put on no expert to analyze the Fitbit that came in, so partially, not the sleep part of the Fitbit analysis, but the walking and the data part came in. Very unusual for it to come in, very exciting that it did. It's a new technology for it to come into a trial, because as you know, scientific evidence is hard to get in a trial. This is new sort of technology to come in, and it did, but not through an expert, through the sergeant. But Linda Fairstein, I mean, I don't know, but this cross-examination, this sergeant admitted that at one point it did not record steps. I mean, I'm writing this down,
right,
and hand motions.
And I
Oh
mean,
my goodness.
I'm sitting here staggered because I feel sorry for this police officer
I do too.
to be put in this position.
I do too.
And I'm wondering what's in the state's mind, the prosecution. It's not a burglary or a low-level crime where there's not. This is a murder of a young woman with a 6-month-old baby at home who is beaten and strangled and left in a ditch, and you don't leave a stone unturned. And if you get the guy who made the Fitbit and created it,
you find him on the highest peak. You find him,
and
you drag him down. Talk about Fitbit. You use your Fitbit to drag him down.
And the idea that you know, the defense attorney is rightly asking about inconsistencies and errors.
Did a great job.
And I find myself 30 years as a prosecutor writing the defense portion of the summation of why this is unreliable, if that's what the people's case is really resting on at its foundation. It's just stunning to me.
I mean, 21 hours. You analyzed 2 hours, but you didn't analyze 22 hours of this is now of the boyfriend, which is critical because of course the defendant here is blaming the boyfriend. You analyzed 2 hours of the Fitbit on him, but not 22 hours on him. You analyzed 3 hours on him, but not 21 hours on him. This is now the Fitbit that he's wearing. This is critical information, and he has to sit there like a potted plant and say to the defense, yes, 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 no, 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 I'm not an expert, I don't know. That is the worst position to have your sergeant, your law enforcement, if you're the prosecutor, to be in and cross-examination, right, Linda?
Totally right, and relying on a novel kind of technology.
Exactly.
And it's just beyond imagining. You've got a lot of living witnesses who've been drinking, doing drugs.
Exactly.
They're going to be attacked for the unreliability of
We've
this
seen
or
that
that.
before. Six drinks, all this, but I can't remember what she said, all this kind of stuff. And now you have a sergeant.
So go get whoever can say they've done this. And yes, you'll have an inconsistency for 3 seconds because I've analyzed 5,000 of these devices.
Right.
But why you would ever
analyzed
leave it to
one.
this, it makes no sense to me.
I mean, right, Linda?
Yes.
Exactly your point. This sergeant has analyzed one.
This one.
Right.
This one.
Right.
So, exactly. And can't speak to whether there's a mechanical defect in the particular Fitbit. I mean, can explain nothing except the bits of time that he watched it. And as you said, the guy walked, Dietrich walked, and some steps were not recorded.
Oh.
Dietrich made motions with his hands.
Not recorded.
Some of those not recorded. I mean, I just see a hole that big that the defense is going to drive through with their Fitbit truck.
And the reason that's so critical about the movement of the hands and the movement of the steps not being recorded and being error is that the defendant is saying that this guy, the boyfriend, is actually the one that did it.
Yeah.
So if it's not recorded, then absolutely that's a defense.
Yes, it is. Oh, certainly can use so much of that testimony, and I'm baffled at why something this critical was relied on.
Right. Okay, so wow, we've been talking so much about the boyfriend here. I think we should go back and hear a little bit about what the boyfriend said he actually was doing that night.
At least up until the time that you separated, was Nikki drinking fairly regularly as well?
Yep.
Have you had drinks with Nikki in the past?
Yes, I have.
Was she a frequent drinker?
No, she wasn't. It was more when we had first met. We went out quite often, on the weekends. And then, when she was pregnant, she didn't drink at all. And we'd still go out, and she would drive and be the designated driver, and go out and meet up with various friends and have a good time. And she would drive and take us home. But then afterwards, I think she probably only drank a handful of times at most since Dylan was born.
Okay, so that's what you meant by afterwards. So since Dylan was born, she was an infrequent drinker?
Yeah.
Do you know if what was the pace she was drinking that night?
Pretty quickly. I mean, I remember on the first, I think, beer or two, I think that was in plastic cups, and I think she had like 2 down, and I was still on my first one. And I thought I was drinking it kind of fast, and she was chugging them down pretty.
And you were drinking at a pretty fair pace yourself?
Yes.
After you got separated from Nikki, you mentioned some shots. Were you taking shots at the watering hole?
Yeah, I had numerous shots. I mean, like probably a good handful of shots.
And you met up with some friends of yours, you and Greg?
Yep.
Specifically, you mentioned a Katie. Who was that?
It was Katie Hanna at the time. She was actually, at the time, she was married to I think the singer of Annex that was the opening band.
And you and Greg were talking to her together?
Yep.
The last area of questioning was that Nikki had left the watering hole with a group of your friends. And do you know about how long after Nikki left the watering hole did you or Greg start to receive some information that you should come down to the sardine can?
I don't exactly recall if she had said something about the sardine can in the short phone conversation we had. But In 20 minutes after that point, in 20 minutes after that point, in 20 minutes after that point.
In your short phone conversation that you had with Nikki while you were still at the watering hole, was she at the sardine can at that time?
No, I remember her saying, I think they were in the parking lot in the car about to leave.
Was Nikki upset with you at that point in time?
No, she didn't seem to be.
Shortly thereafter, you indicated that you received some text messages.
Yes.
At some point, did Nikki send you a series of angry text messages?
Yes, she did.
Do you recall the content of those angry text messages?
I don't specifically recall exactly what they were. I know that, or I don't know, I don't really want to guess, but they're like, what girl am I talking to, or something on the lines of that, and some other comments that I didn't know where they were coming from. And
is it fair to say that some of those text messages were really rather upset or derogatory?
yes, they were.
This may not be pleasant, but if I read them to you, can you tell me whether or not that was a text message you believe she sent?
Yes.
Do you believe that at around 11:12 p.m. she sent you a text asking you, quote, "So what bitch you with"?
Yeah, that rings a bell, yes.
Do you recall her sending a text message that said, "Fuck you, abusive asshole"?
Yes.
Do you recall her sending a message that said, quote, "Wow, what slut are you with? Because none of your friends know"?
Yes, I do.
And another one that said, "I am not surprised. How many times have your dick been off for some whore"?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall responding to Nikki's text messages?
I believe I received those all like as like a bunch grouped together that I had missed, that I had not looked at the phone in a few minutes or however long it was, and saw them all, and I responded back something kind of nicely, just trying to diffuse and maybe calm her down, because she seemed upset from the content of her text.
Was your response to her an angry response?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't upset.
How did it make you feel when you heard those text messages?
I was kind of puzzled. I didn't know what she was thinking, or I didn't know what was going on, you know.
Did Nikki continue to send derogatory text messages to you?
Yeah, I believe she sent some more after that.
Do you recall getting a text message that said, quote, "Sure, you still love whores"?
Yeah, something like that, yep.
And do you recall what your response was to that?
I think I did like an LOL or something like that back to her, and like, are you joking? Are you kidding? What's going on here? I didn't get it.
Do you recall her sending you a text saying, quote, "Yup, I learn lots"?
Yep.
And quote, "Why else you so fucking retarded"?
Yeah.
Do you recall responding to that text message?
I don't know what text I specifically responded to at what point, but I did respond back here and there, when I did look at my phone and noticed that she was still, texting me, and I don't know at what point I tried calling her too. And
do you recall if any of your responses to her text messages were angry responses?
No.
Do you recall using vulgar language with her in response?
No.
And why did you not respond in a vulgar or upset way?
Well, I wasn't upset, and I think I just kind of thought she was upset for an unknown reason, and that there wasn't really a reason for it.
And in fact, is it fair to say your responses were, you mentioned LOL or LOL, stop it, Nikki?
Yep.
And then just saying that you would be there soon or find her?
Yep, that I'd meet her at the sardine can or whatever. I'll be there soon.
Do you recall if the derogatory text messages then continued even after that?
I believe they did, yes.
And at any point in response, to those messages, did you get upset with Nikki?
No, I didn't.
In fact, at one point she did send a text message that said, "You hurt me all the time."
Yes, she did.
All right, we heard a bit then, a replay from Douglas Dietrich from his own words about that night, the text messages that were going back and forth between himself and the victim. Some pretty graphic stuff back and forth. What did you think, Linda, about that?
I think it's always so sad and hard fact that here's this young woman dead and in a horrible way. They're not good murders, but I mean really 200 focal points of injury and strangulation with a baby at the house and a babysitter. And it's not, you kind of, people talk about a good victim. Or, I mean, she's a victim and she didn't deserve her death. But it's clear that there's a very ugly dynamic with her and her boyfriend. You can sort of understand what might have led before DNA investigators to charging him. They're fighting. They're jealous of each other. They're saying horrible things. She uses the word abusive about him in one of them. And as he sits on the stand, he doesn't say, no, she'd never said anything. Somebody must have had her phone. I mean, I was kind of waiting for him to say, the phone was lost. That's not her language. But
he's not on trial.
Not now.
Not now.
Gregory Burch is trying to get him there.
Right. Yeah, the defendant now is trying to get this guy on the stand to be the defendant going forward. Very interesting. This trial has so many, we've got that going, and we've got the Fitbit thing going on, which we just talked about, and we have our own expert here, Aaron Keller, our own host here in Law and Crime, and he's going to recap for us the Fitbit and cell phone data analysis from today. So we're just going to play a couple minutes of that with our own Aaron Keller, recapping for us what happened. Let's hear it.
Prosecutors wrapped up their case in chief in the George Burch murder trial in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The final two state witnesses were forensics examiners, and they provided some critical testimony. George Burch is accused of murdering Nicole Vanderheiden. Burch claims she had a one-night stand with him and that her boyfriend, Douglas Dietrich, killed her when he found out. The state is trying to prove Burch is the one who did it and that Dietrich didn't by introducing Fitbit data and cell phone data. Sergeant Richard Lopnow compared Dietrich's Fitbit data to video of Dietrich during police interviews. He said the data was mostly accurate.
Out of the 300 individual minutes that you noted, how many times did you observe a discrepancy between Mr. Dietrich not actually taking steps where you observed the Fitbit registering steps?
I believe there was about 3 times I observed that.
The defense attacked the sergeant's qualifications.
Do you have a background in technology where you can tell us how a Fitbit operates?
No, I don't.
Can you tell us how the Fitbit app operates?
No, I can't.
The prosecution next called computer forensic crime analyst Tyler Bailing. He confirmed Dietrich was not active at the crucial time when investigators believe Nicole Vanderheiden was murdered.
And then this displays his activity on the far left at 2:30 in the morning until the far right 6:30 a.m. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Are there any instances where Mr. Dietrich is registering steps according to that data?
There are at approximately 4:18 a.m. Roughly 12. Roughly 12. Roughly 12.
However, the data from the defendant's cell phone places him at critical locations associated with the murder.
I observed Mr. Burch's phone traveling to Ms. Vanderheiden's residence on Berkeley. I observed Mr. Burch's phone traveling to the site where the body was found.
One of the forensics examiners testified that the boyfriend, Douglas Dietrich, used his cell phone at 3:07 a.m. on the day of the murder to communicate with his babysitter, asking if the babysitter had seen the victim. That was one of the last times he used his phone until much later the afternoon that he later reported the victim missing. This is Aaron Keller for the Law and Crime Network.
Thank you, Erin. Now, that babysitter took the stand today, and she said something that we hadn't heard before. She took the stand for the defense. She said that the boyfriend had said to her that he was hit in the head, Nikki was hit in the head, and wanted to walk home. That was stunning testimony today. So, Linda, what did you think of that?
That took me completely by surprise, and of course it puts in a new element between them. Why didn't he go to see what was wrong with her? Did she leave by herself? Had she been hit, or did she hit her head on something she was intoxicated too?
Right. And that he knew about that he knew that she'd been hit in the head.
Right.
And all
was
of
still
that.
very calm about it. And according to Ms. Kennedy, didn't seem to show any kind of distress.
Right.
So I think also we just saw in that wrap up by Aaron that you live and die by this new technology. You've got the Fitbit claims, whether or not they're challenged, and really challenged quite well here, but then you've got the cell phone pings from towers. And I can remember as a prosecutor, not even a young prosecutor, when that technology became our best friend. And you can suddenly prove that someone is where he says he wasn't, to a certainty that he's at this parking spot or that house. So how that technology has changed the courtroom, and I think this was a brilliant opportunity for Fitbit to be on display, and I'm not sure, as you and I have discussed, that it was to its best.
Well, because they didn't have an expert. They didn't have an actual Fitbit expert. In fact, the sergeant who took the stand said that it was what he was saying was, quote unquote, mostly accurate. Oh, ouch. And he said that he had no technology background in Fitbit. He couldn't explain the app. He couldn't explain the app either. Double ouch, I think, from the prosecution's perspective. And you and I were commenting as we were looking at the prosecution, so the group there, the panel. These are not, just sort of young prosecutors trying their first case. We sort of wondered, why weren't they seasoned prosecutors knowing that they needed to get somebody from Fitbit, the president, who I would think would be thrilled to be there and promoting his or her product and being able then to advertise that this was a murder trial.
Absolutely. Well, you would want to crush that issue so that the cross-examination that happened could not have happened in the way it did. And I don't know what issue it opens on appeal. I mean, certainly that this was not an expert, and it's not reliable testimony, whatever is going to be argued by both sides at summation.
Even if your own witness says it was mostly accurate, and then you had this testimony where the witness that you put on the stand, that you, the prosecutor, put on the stand, that said there were steps that were taken that were not put on the recorded on the Fitbit, the hand movements were not recorded. This is critical testimony for the prosecution, and you had your own witness saying it's not accurate. I really think that's difficult for the prosecution. As we end today, Linda, thank you so much for being here today on the Burch case. It's an exciting case. We don't know as we end today whether tomorrow we'll bring the defendant on the stand. We're not sure as we end today whether he will take the stand or not. We'll have to wait and see tomorrow whether he takes the stand. That is, the defense is saying they're not sure. The defense is also, we're learning, telling us, as we're hearing from our crack producers and reporters there on the scene, telling us that there are issues of snitches in the jailhouse, and we don't know, to add on to that layer, we don't know if we're talking about jailhouse snitches, meaning jailhouse snitches for the boyfriend, somebody that the boyfriend met, Dietrich met, and as a jailhouse snitch against him, and somebody's going to testify about something he said, which would actually exonerate the defendant now on the stand, or it's somebody about Burch who's going to say something about Burch, the now defendant. We just don't know. The judge is hearing about that today, and we'll have more about that tomorrow as we start with Law and Crime, and I have bright and early tomorrow, and I hope you'll join us tomorrow as we start again with the Wisconsin versus Burch case. We'll be here, Law and Crime.